He's actually a good and old friend of mine, coincidentally. We were in a band together at one point in time. I was the bass player and he was the guitar player. He's got mad skills. He's also got mad skills with Java, but this is a JavaScript conference. So he's going to tell you how he made that transition to becoming a JavaScript developer.
All right. Hi. My name is Aron Racho, like you said. I'm a developer at Jive Software, particularly in the platform API team, where we build the public API for Jive, so third-party developers can use that to integrate to Jive. Like he said, I am primarily a JavaScript developer, which is leading me to a Java developer, which leads me to the question, why a Bromance with Node? Well, Bromance, JavaScript and Node.js basically seduced me with its awesomeness. I've been working in Java for about 10 years, and maybe JavaScript in 2 to 3 years, and about 7 weeks in Node.js. 7 weeks in, the platform is exhilarating. The amount of things you can do with it very quickly and very fluently is addicting. So Bromance also, well, just like any good bromance, things are still a little bit awkward since I am a Java developer after all, right? So I'm still transitioning in there, and we're sort of feeling each other out. The Jive SDK is our love child, 7 weeks in. So that's what I'd like to show you today, how it's made, how it's structured, and things like that, of that nature. But before we jump into the Jive SDK, I have to talk a little bit about Jive, what we do, to give you a little bit of context. Jive is a social business software company, a pure play company, which is focused on making it easier to do work. From my perspective, because I use Jive in my daily work, that's creating content and finding people I can collaborate with within giant communities that are hosted by Jive. That fundamentally makes it easier to work. Another good thing is that Jive makes it easy to integrate third-party systems, because in my daily job I have to use systems like Jira and stuff like that, and it's easy to bring that value into Jive and socialize it in my network there. Okay, so in our latest cloud offering, Jive has presented this notion of a purposeful place. The developer evangelist described it really well. He said it was a metaphor for focused engagement on specific use cases, such as sales opportunity management. Now, very concretely, what this means in the context of Jive is creating a social group, which is basically a collaborative space within Jive, configuring that group to push in data relating to a specific Salesforce opportunity that lives in Salesforce into Jive, allowing the Jive members to socialize that Salesforce opportunity within your Jive network, and then reflecting any conversations back about that opportunity straight back into Salesforce. Now, let me show you, this is what I mean. Here's a Salesforce opportunity. It's kind of blurry, but you can see at the top here, some sales dudes, me, having a conversation about that opportunity in Chatter. And down back here is kind of the information relating to that Salesforce opportunity, like how much it costs, the value amount of it, what state it is in the pipeline. So what Jive does is push that information to Salesforce, from Salesforce into my Purposeful Places group within Jive in the form of tiles. And tiles are basically this sort of like widget 2.0 experience, where the visualization of the tile is handled by Jive, but the data is pushed in. And so that gives it a very consistent experience when you're looking at third-party objects within Jive. And then finally, the sort of like the chatter experience within Salesforce is reflected inside Jive in an activity stream. Now I can reply to the activity stream and have my replies reflected out to Salesforce. Now, where the Jive SDK comes in, and Node, is that we have to enable developers to very efficiently create third-party services to broker that sort of integration between Salesforce and Jive and Salesforce and Jira and other external systems. We have to make it extremely easy to spin up a service, right? Like the 5-minute experience of creating the Express app. That's my first point of falling in love with Node.js. All of a sudden, in like 5 minutes, I had something useful. That's the kind of experience I want to replicate with the Jive SDK framework. Importantly, developers should have fun doing it. I really have to say, like, after 10 years of enterprise Java, Node.js is really fun. I'm not talking about necessarily easy. I'm talking about fun to play with. It just is a really refreshing experience. It reset my developer clock about 10 years. But I've just started programming again. And I think Tracy Abrahams was talking about that, just that she has a lot of enthusiasm. So that's where I am again, 10 years back. Finally, the developer experience should just be giving you enough control, just the amount of control you need. We're not going to force you to, do it exactly the way we want to do, or not going to force you to build something from scratch. We're going to help you. We're going to give you a developer kit. Like I said, why Node? Well, I already covered that. There was a huge community support that we really love. There's lots of Node developers. There's lots of JavaScript developers. So it increases the kind of developer footprint that we're looking for. There's lots and lots of third-party libraries. I really appreciated finding, for example, that there is a log4j, which is like a very, an analog for log4j that I've used all my life, basically. There's awesome tooling. I think that the number one that addicted me in the first place was there's a plugin for IntelliJ, which is a very popular kind of IDE that allows you to do server-side debugging of Node.js programs. And that just blew me away, and I just love that. And finally, NPM, that was a killer feature for me because it was like dependency management for humans, as opposed to Maven, which is, sorry for Maven people, fans out there, but it's dependency management for computers. So anyway, so what is the Jive SDK? It is an opinionated framework. Thanks, Jesse, for that terminology. It allows you to plug in your business logic and your UI, and then create a running service which serves REST or UI, and lets us handle kind of the Jive-specific GUI stuff in the middle. That's authentication, security, handling, brokering the communication, and so forth. It's also, this framework is built on top of the Jive API, which allows you to build your own stuff from scratch if you really wanted to. And I found that this also allows you to build just the pieces you need to handle Jive within your own framework. And finally, it's open source, so you can see what I'm talking about through these links. One of my favorite, one of the most important features is the kind of service autogen command line tool that we wrote that allows you to basically create a running service from one of 9 templates that are growing right now. And you can, and it's based on NPM technology. You can define a sort of a shell file in package.json, and that shell file points to your Node.js file, which then NPM installs as a global utility. And for example, when you run it, it tells you that you can create a service with any one of these 9 tiles that you can sort of mix and match. And this is what it looks like when you run it. You sort of specify the tile you want, then run it, the end. So at that point, then you can sort of customize the service to the way you want it to run. And let's see, time. Let's talk a little, very briefly about the architecture of the framework part of the SDK. It's basically a Node.js Express app that's been decorated to handle tile lifecycle services with Jive. And underneath of it, there are sort of like mounted sub-apps which allow customized routes for each tile. And because each tile can have its own configuration UI within a social group to configure what Salesforce opportunity you want brought into Jive, for example. And in the main SDK part of it, the kind of the core of it, we also supply kind of like the core routes for handling things like tile registration and maybe some developer API type stuff that helps you list what tiles are in your system and to also install those tiles within the Jive instance. And when you run the autogen, it builds essentially an Express app, a basic Express app. Each of these are the tiles I kind of chose. There's an app.js that generates for you, and of course some dependencies in a basic configuration file. In the opening it up further, we can see that each tile has a self-contained backend, which basically defines like the routes that you want, and sort of backend services that handle data pushing and lifecycle event handling that are specific to Jive tiles. And then we've also, because it's an Express sub app, have the opportunity to package in with that tile the sort of like the front end static assets that are used for generating UI. So that's kind of a nice organizational way of making a framework for Jive. This is what the generated app.js looks like. It's quite simple to start up. It looks exactly like an Express app. It asks you to it generates an Express app, then decorates that Express app with the mounted sub apps for the individual tile, auto wires the various tiles. So, and I'll explain that. So, I'll explain that in a minute, and then basically starts it. So that should be very familiar to Express developers. Now, routes for the purposes of serving UI are auto-wired. What this means is that on Bootstrap, which is this first part here, the Jive service init, the system crawls through the routes directory and sets up routes based on the directory structure or an explicit path. And each, as like I said earlier, each tile has its own template directory. So it becomes really simple within those routes to describe which template you want to use when you're rendering some UI. And then we use Mustache for templating. It's a very nice third-party library. Let's see. Like I said earlier, there's several ways to auto-wire a route. One is through directory convention. I won't go through that too much. The another way is to explicitly say which path you want this route to be wired against. So similar to route auto-wiring is events auto-wiring. If you declare a file within the backend of your tile, this on Bootstrap, the system is going to look for any sort of like event handlers defined through the exported within that file, right? Now, this allows you to respond to lifecycle events relating to tiles. If a tile was installed from a Jive system, your system can, your framework can respond to that event and begin pushing data right away. I said earlier also that it's important that your system push data into Jive at a periodic basis. And the system, the framework on startup or Bootstrap will also look for any tasks exported out in any file and then wire those in as running tasks. Yes. All right. So one of the nice things is that there's with, like I said earlier, in using Node.js is that there's lots of good libraries for testing. One of the libraries we use is Mocha, which is really highly recommended for functional testing. We are going to add the notion that we need to actually build out this framework to be highly available, which is why I was very interested on the OpenShift conversation topic earlier. I'd also like to invite you guys to get involved. Contact me if you want to be a third-party developer for Jive. And of course, please check out the code and give me feedback. This is all very new to us, me. And thank you very much.